cyber, all carriers usually manipulate their own form. So this is why carriers are all different for cyber insurance, because they all don't use the same form. But it's mainly for a cyber attack. So on your computer or ransomware or something like that. So, and it's also the big one right now is where people send the links to you to pay and you're expecting to pay something and you go ahead and pay it. And then your client actually calls you 2 days later, says, "Where's my payment?" That would protect that sort of instance for cyber insurance. But that's a really big topic right now.
Yeah. Hello, Empower Nation. Welcome to Empower Her Money podcast. I am your host, Angela Duncan, speaker, best-selling author, serial entrepreneur, and we talk all things money and business. Today's episode is sponsored by Merchant Insurance Solutions. And today's episode, I get to interview Staci Merchant, and she's going to talk about why you might be failing when it comes to your insurance for your business. As a business owner, you know your business, but do you know how to protect it? You spend hours building your business, taking care of your clients and your employees. It's time to have the right insurance agency do the same for you. An experienced insurance agent that's specialized in your industry, that provides you with the personalized service that you deserve. At Merchant Insurance Solutions, they take the time to get to know your business, to ask the right questions, to offer you the right insurance solutions tailored just for you. With decades of experience, Merchant Insurance Solutions is committed to helping you protect the business that you have worked so hard to grow. Whether you are just starting your journey as an entrepreneur or a new business, or you might have many years of experience, Merchant Insurance Solutions will take the time to help you find the right policies for you. Contact Merchant Insurance Solutions today. Speak with Staci Merchant at 305-804-2989 or merchantinsurancesolutions.com. Hi, Staci. Welcome to Empower Her Money podcast. How is your day today?
My day is wonderful. How was your day?
It's awesome. I know we're here in Miami and the weather's kind of odd for us this time of year. So luckily there's, hopefully no crazy windstorm coming like we had about a month ago.
I know, expecting some inflatables to start flying around here any day now.
Yeah. And weather's always such an important topic for what you do. You're a commercial insurance agency. But I would love for you to first start with your story. Talk about how did you decide to get into the insurance world?
Okay, my story is complicated in the sense I never thought I'd go into insurance because my father was in insurance. He worked for Nationwide Insurance for 30 years. And my mom actually worked for an independent insurance agency about 10 years probably before I got into insurance. And I just hated insurance because that's all they did it. But so I actually went into school to be like computers management information systems, and I got into it and I kind of start realizing who you are. And I'm like, I'm not the type of person that can sit behind the office in an office all day in a dark room. So I needed to be out and talking to people and actually doing some of the work that. So what I like about insurance is that I'm in the office and I'm out of the office. So through all that, I realized that, hey, insurance was actually the best career for me because I saw what they did because my dad was more back office carrier side. My mom was agency side. So I decided that insurance was the best thing. So actually, when I was 16, that I met one of the owners of the agency that my mom worked for, and I expressed interest that I wanted to go into insurance. So he actually started molding me. His name was Gary Tripp, and he actually started molding me into what classes to take in high school, what sort of things to study, and then in college I went and got a risk management degree, risk management insurance at Ohio State. So I basically starting at 16, I knew what I was going to do, and I kind of followed that.
Very nice. So one thing I noted from that story, and this happened to me with my daughter too, is that early on you're thinking, I'm not getting an insurance. You know, both your parents were in insurance, and you just thought this is just not going to be the job that I want to have.
Right.
But you ended up in that field. So there's some hope because my daughter, who is 20 now, she's a junior in college. Growing up, when I owned a Remax office, she used to say, like, I will never be in real estate. So it'll be interesting to see as she transitions into her career, like, is she going to come that direction, but we'll see. I guess that could be some encouragement there.
Yeah,
But
I think my kids, so I have three kids, and my kids might go into insurance as much as I tell them not to go into insurance. I think right now they see like we got some cookies from a carrier that we represent and chocolates and snacks. A couple of days ago, they're like, "What kind of job get where you get cookies and snacks into your house?" I'm like, and they love that. I was like, okay.
yeah, so good potential. So you focus on commercial insurance. How about you kind of tell the audience a little bit about commercial insurance versus what other people just deem as like the big umbrella of insurance?
Right. So, commercial insurance in a nutshell is insurance for businesses. That means that anything a business may need. So, a business starting out would always need general liability insurance to start off with. That's what I always recommend you're starting off with, that protects your financial, your pocketbook in case a lawsuit happens for bodily injury or property damage. Because and it can happen to anybody. And people could always tell me that it will never happen to me. And I'm like, you can be at a convention and all of a sudden you knock down somebody's banner. They're not cheap. That's general liability and coverage. You set your purse down, somebody trips over it, sues you. That's general liability coverage. So while you're out, and your homeowners won't usually protect you while you're on the doing business.
Mhm.
So usually general liability is where any business would start. They buy a building, they're going to need property coverage for the building, for the closing, and then also they might want to insure their stuff inside of it. They start buying autos, they need commercial auto insurance. They need, if they're a professional, like an insurance agent or a doctor or anybody is actually kind of considered a professional nowadays, is professional liability insurance. And now we're getting into hot topics like EPLI, which is age discrimination, sexual harassment, wage hour disputes, and then cyber liability is another one. I was just talking about that recently. Like when this product first came out 15, 20 years ago, it was so cheap. I could add it to a policy for $100. Now that the premiums have gone up quite a bit for cyber liability because it's happening a lot more.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell. It's insurance for businesses.
Yeah. So first, starting off a business, liability is the first thing. We live in Florida, but lots of states have different laws. But when it comes to liability, I mean, you can get sued for just about anything. So that first policy you said is the liability, to at least make sure that you are covered should you have an incident, even if it's not your fault, that someone's going to sue you. That's what the liability coverage is for, correct?
Correct. And I always say, like, even if you're not at fault, it's best to have it because that's an automatic attorney on retainer. It's the cheapest attorney that you're going to get on a retainer. So that's where you're just getting the lawsuit, you're handing it over to the insurance company, which then has a whole team of attorneys that would cost a lot more than your policy. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's good
And it
for
could be relatively inexpensive to start, right, for a new business for the liability policy.
completely. Like people hype up how much insurance can be. I mean, it for say for a new insurance agency, if you're starting out general liability, probably is like $350 a
Mhm.
year, maybe 450, but 350. So yeah, I sell policies all the way down to $250. So it doesn't matter. But yeah, they can be really cheap. And even workers' comp. Oh, I didn't mention workers' comp. So workers' comp, it would be for employees if they get injured. But workers' comp people like the prices, and this is another thing. So the prices have gone reverse for workers' comp. 20 years ago, workers' comp premiums used to be double than what they are now. So,
Hmm.
for example, a roofing company would be paying about 20 years ago about 21% per hundred of value that they pay for their employees. Nowadays, they're paying like 10%. So
Hmm.
people like they've heard stories and stories and stories how expensive insurance is, but some of these stories are 20 years ago. And I'm more of like telling people like just call me. I'll tell you exactly what your rate is because workers' comp in Florida where we are, the rates are set by the state. So they change every single year. And last 10 years, they've gone down about 15% a year, every single year.
Yep. And so for the audience that might not understand, what is workers' comp and when are you required to carry it in the state of Florida?
Okay, so in the state of Florida, so workers' comp, it's injury, it protects if the employee gets injured on the job. It has some other things that would provide benefits if the employee is injured and they loss of consortium or they can't do their job around the house. There's employee liability built into it, but the main job of workers' comp is to protect an employee that is injured on the job and provide all their medical care and expenses to get them whole again and back to work, obviously. So what was the second part?
Oh, there's state requirements because
State
if you have
requirements.
one employee or 100 employees, there are some state requirements behind a workers' comp
Right.
policy.
So then the state requirements for Florida is if you are in the construction industry, if you have one or more employees, you're required to have workers' comp. And
Mhm.
that one or more includes the owner. But as an owner, you can elect to exempt yourself from workers' comp, and you file that through the state. Very easy. They have a little clickable link. For construction industries, you pay $50. Non-construction, you pay, it's actually free if you wish to exempt yourself. Then for your non-construction industries, it's 4 or more employees. And that includes the owners too. So say you have 4 partners who start a accounting firm, you are required to have workers' comp unless you all exempt yourself. Um,
Mm.
but I would always say it's cheap. Like it really is cheap. Like especially say for an accounting firm, just to make sure they have it. I've seen crazy claims like for accounting firms or insurance offices or your run-of-the-mill offices where somebody's changing a light in the office and then falls from their desk and then falls and breaks their leg or something.
Yeah.
But I've
Yeah.
seen those and they happen because you see
Yeah.
like those claims and you're like, what were you doing? Like, why were you doing that? That's not your job.
Yeah. Now you mentioned cyber insurance as well. So what is cyber insurance and what does that cover?
Cyber insurance is it's very intricate because all the carrier forms they're all different. So not to kind of backtrack is that most policies like a property policy, a general liability policy, auto policy, work comp policy, they all have an ISO form, which is the standard form that most carriers offer. Cyber, all carriers usually manipulate their own form. So this is why carriers are all different for cyber insurance because they all don't use the same form.
Mm.
But it's mainly for a cyber attack. So on your computer or ransomware or something like that. So, and it's also the big one right now is where people send the links to you to pay and you're expecting to pay something and you go ahead and pay it. And then your client actually calls you 2 days later, says, where's my payment? That would protect that sort of instance for cyber insurance, but that's a really big topic right now.
Yeah. So it's not just for like loss of data, like someone hacks your system and steals, your client's credit card information, but
Right.
the links as well. I wasn't aware of that with the cyber insurance because I've seen that a lot, especially in the real estate world. Like they get the wrong wire instructions or they get a link to make a payment to something and it's not legitimate. It goes who knows where. So that's interesting that cyber insurance will help protect you from that aspect as well. So that's good.
Yeah, cyber's changing a lot because I've even seen so like I was looking at a form yesterday where for general liability coverage and standard in all general liability policies and is an exclusion for war. And I saw this paper yesterday where they actually have added a cyber attack in this war exclusion. So I was like, oh, that's different. They've now like have added to this because I'm going to assume that some attorney got a claim through for cyber attack from a foreign entity, and they considered it war, but
Mhm.
they wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. Now let's talk about property insurance because there is, your clients that own their building, but there's also clients that rent their building. So talk about those two different types and what kind of insurance you would recommend in both of those situations.
Okay, so owning a building, your insurance requirements are usually in it. This is if you're finance, if you're mortgage, it's going to your requirements are going to pretty much be passed down by the mortgage company or your lender. So they're going to determine what your max or what you need to insure the building for usually. And they're going to make sure that you have, for example, it's ordinance or law or wind coverage or no wind coverage. That's a big topic right now. A lot of because of the wind rates in Florida in the past
Mhm.
year, and property insurance rates have almost doubled because of lack of competition and a lot of statutes in the state of Florida. Sorry. And so I lost my track of thought. But anyway,
But
so
if
mortgage
you're
company.
renting a building too, you also need to have insurance for that.
Right. So then if you're renting, a lot of your requirements are going to be set by the landlord then. So versus lender versus landlord. So landlord would say a lot of them would state that you'd have to have a big one's plate glass insurance. They want to make sure your plate glass isn't covered. They always want business income coverage, which would protect the landlord for so business income is if you have a loss that is covered. So say you insure windstorm and you have a windstorm loss, a claim to the building, then you lose your income because you can't operate it out of that unit anymore. The business income would replace that income. So that's basically covering the landlord for their future rent. So they always want that business income covered. And then also if you're renting, you want insurance for your goods inside. So say you have a whole bunch of desks, chairs, ovens. If it's a restaurant, you want all that covered for a hurricane, then you would have that coverage. But I always tell people, I'm like, insurance is here for, I mean, some of it's required by landlords, lenders, whatever, state of Florida's. So, but they're usually here also to help you sleep at night. So if you feel like you don't need to insure every single piece of every desk or computer and you're fine with that, don't insure it. However, there are co-insurance, and that's just an important thing when you're looking at insurance policy. So just not to get too geeky about it, but co-insurance really is from the carrier saying that you must insure everything to value. So if you say I have $1 million of stuff here, but I only wanted you're gonna I only probably have $100,000 claim, so I only wish to insure 100,000. The carriers actually will penalize you for not insuring it to value.
Yeah. And you touched on business income. And one of the other avenues for business income are rental properties, right? So, like if you have an apartment complex, business income is important to consider because if something does happen to your building and you're not able to rent it out, which means you're not collecting income, then that can be part of your insurance claim as well to help reimburse you for that loss of income. So that's something that, landlords of both commercial buildings and of apartment complexes or multifamily should be also considering.
Definitely, if they want to pay for it. So, I mean, everything has a rate, so, even the same rate that usually applies for the building would apply for the business income coverage also.
Yeah. And
So
business owners who have vehicles, even if they're not commercial vehicles, but their employees can drive them, go pick up paperwork or go take photos of a property, that's also considered a commercial insurance policy, correct?
that would be considered under, so if a business doesn't have any autos, they don't own any autos, you can easily add hired non-owned to the general liability policy.
Mhm.
And hired is easy. That's if you rent a vehicle. So that would be one of those check marks on the on your rental contract if you wish to have hired liability coverage. And you would say no because you have it through your insurance carrier. But then there's non-owned coverage, which non-owned coverage is for all the employees' cars, all the owner's cars that are not in the business name. So if they're running an errand and they get in an accident, that would be the non-owned liability. So yeah, I recommend that for everybody. I'm like, if you just get in your car, you need it.
Yeah. So I've heard some interesting insurance policies. Like, for example, and I do believe that this falls under the commercial umbrella as well. But say, for example, you are, it's wedding season, right? And you're renting a venue. So, one, you need insurance. Most times, that venue is going to require you as the bride and the groom to have insurance.
Right.
And then also, there's some other insurances that I've heard about. Like, say, for example, it's a destination wedding and you want to cover the wedding dresses or the gifts that are being shipped or any of those type of things. Is that policies that you help clients with as well?
No, that sounds very personal. I do event coverage. So like if somebody is holding a wedding, they wish to, and they have to get event insurance. Like for example, I just wrote a small policy, but it's important to cover it, a golf cart parade. So I'm like, those happen where you want coverage. But as far as that, that would be almost like a cargo coverage of protecting the dress while in transit. And we do write that. So that would be people like truckers can insure transit coverage.
Mhm.
Your freight forwarders that are shipping from, say, I'm in Miami. So we have people coming from, it would be, well, I'm trying to think where they normally ship from, but Nicaragua, Dominican, Bahamas, all around there. So you're wishing to insure your cargo while it gets to your destination, and then from your destination off to somewhere else in the United States or Canada. You can insure that through a commercial policy, and that would be a cargo coverage.
Can you give us any examples of maybe some of the most unique or maybe interesting insurance policies or for a situation that you can remember doing for a client?
The one that always sticks out is actually right when I first got into insurance. So I was brand new, 6 months in, and at that point, you're wanting to write anything and everything. And I tried to write a property policy for rugs. It was Oriental rugs. So it's very hard to determine a value for Oriental rugs, but we try to determine what the value was so we can insure the Oriental rugs while they're actually in a storage unit.
Mhm.
So it was very difficult. I don't even think we actually did it because I could just imagine the underwriter on the other side, like, what, you want to insure Oriental rugs in a storage unit? That
Yeah. But
owner,
that's a good point though, because for those people who have storage units, they have to understand that the insurance for that storage company is only for the building. It's not for the contents, your personal contents that sit inside that storage unit. So that's something that they would need to consider. I think most larger storage unit companies will tell you to go get your own insurance,
right?
but that's interesting to know that it's not covered under that business. So as the consumer, you also need to think about that insurance as well.
Yes, and I mean the same thing goes to condos. So as a commercial agent, we would write condos. So we write the building of the condos. We write the whole association. So we don't write the inside of the units, but we write the association's liability, the building, the directors and officers, the crime, the fidelity, excess if they need excess, and etc. But we talk to the unit owners a lot of like, this policy only covers the walls. It doesn't cover anything inside the walls. So if you put any finishes on the walls, you have special flooring or anything, that this policy does not cover any of that. It is really just to get the building back together.
Yeah.
You're responsible for everything inside of the walls.
Yeah. And so you just touched on directors, directors and officers insurance. What is that?
Sorry, I talked about two. So the directors and officers would protect the board, any board, for any decisions they make as a board. So if someone were to sue them, because say for example, we'll use a condo association. So say they sue them because they didn't agree with how they allocated the money somewhere, then this policy would protect them in that lawsuit.
Mhm. So
And then
when someone's considering running for president or treasury of their HOA, then that association should have an insurance policy that protects them since they're making decisions on behalf of owners of a condo complex.
yeah, and I think the state of Florida requires the association to carry it. I'm trying to think. I think it's built into the statutes in Florida that they're required to carry it. And then fidelity coverage is the other big one. We offer this for businesses too, along with condos, and it's usually built into a lot of policies, but sometimes we request it differently. And that's the main purpose of fidelity. It has a lot of other coverages built in, but it's to protect you if an employee was stealing from you.
Mhm.
So for condos, it's all about if the directors were stealing from the association or the property managers were stealing from the association, and then they would get reimbursed from the insurance carrier. Provided proof. Actually, I have a good friend. She's a dentist, and she found out an employee was stealing with her from her for over 10 years. And
Wow.
I found out that I was like, "Oh, did you put a claim under your fidelity insurance?" And she said, "No. I didn't even know it was there." Like, oh, well, your agent didn't do a good job.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different lines that you, as a business owner, if you're not in insurance, you just don't know what you don't know. So making sure that you hire a professional, someone that's well versed in the commercial market, because there are some agencies that offer personal insurance, like your personal home, your personal flood, and they dabble a little bit on commercial, but that's not the person that you want to go to for your business. You want to make sure you're going to a commercial agent like yourself that has been in the business for a while, that knows the different aspects and can ask you the right questions to make sure that all parts of your business, at least you're offering the insurance. Now they might turn it down, but at least you're making them aware of what's available and what they should have to cover their insurance. So I'll tell you from, and this is a wild thing, I think, just in the state of Florida, because, you know, I had a personal lines insurance company, but one of the most interesting policies that were available, and it's not anymore, I looked it up recently, was alien abduction insurance. So there was a company in the state of Florida where you could pay, and it's more like a novelty thing, but they gave you a certificate, and they did have 2 claims in the 30 years that they were in business.
Wow.
But if you got abducted and could prove that you were abducted and you suffered some type of stress from being abducted from an alien, then they would pay out like $100,000. And the policy was like maybe, I don't know, $25, but it was more of a, I think, of a novelty. But
You're
because
right.
they had a couple of claims, they obviously weren't profitable enough to pay that out. Now, I'm not sure how you would prove that. I just found that was like one of the most interesting insurance. And of course, it's in the state of Florida, of all places, you know.
Yeah, the Florida man thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd have to get some sort of reinsurer to back them on that, which assume a reinsurer would be like, okay,
Right.
because of what's the likelihood of ever paying this out. But no, I mean, we keep talking about it. There is so many different insurance policies for a commercial insurance agent, and it's really even hard to like give you a whole list of them. It's more of a case by case of when you meet
Mhm.
with a company of what you think they could possibly, and it's a conversation honestly with the owner of what concerns them. So what if you're concerned about going to Colombia and getting kidnapped, then we could talk about foreign liability policies. So
Mhm.
that's another thing that we do have is like protecting them for being kidnapped. And then it's also the repatriation back home if they were injured while they were there. So it's foreign workers comp. So it's just a lot of different coverages that we have that it's all based off of their conversations and what maybe is keeping them up at night. If they're worried that their accountant or their employees might be stealing from them, then it's important that we make sure that they're covered for it. Uh,
Yes.
I have people where they're very concerned about their professional liability coverage. They've seen the claims, they've seen how the sorry, I'm losing battery, but they've
Uh-huh.
seen the coverages, they've seen them pay out, and they think it's worthwhile for every company to have.
Yep.
So,
All right. Well, we'll start wrapping up the episode. So I've got one fun question for you really quick
yeah.
is if you had a superpower, what would it be and why?
Oh, invisibility. It would always be invisibility. It's I wish to know what other people think about you. I at times. It's just to be in the room, hear certain conversations, high power conversations that you can't get in the door to.
Yeah.
It's I would always be invisible.
Yay. So Staci, if our audience wants to get in touch with you, learn more about commercial insurance and how you can help them, what's the best way for them to reach you?
So the best way is always the phone, picking up the phone, calling me, texting me at 305-804-2989, or email. And that's a very long email. It's smerchant@merchantinsurancesolutions.com.
Is that
But
the website too? Merchantinsurancesolutions.com?
yes,
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate in-depth conversation about commercial insurance. Obviously, you're very knowledgeable. So if you are a business owner and you want to at least maybe have your current policy reviewed, making sure that everything is covered that's important to you, reach out to Staci. Her team is amazing. Obviously, you can tell by the conversation, she's very knowledgeable about commercial insurance. And Staci, thank you so much for your time
thank
today.
you. Sorry for boring you about insurance today. Thanks.
Thank you so much for tuning into Empower Her Money podcast. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, share this podcast, and leave a review wherever you are tuning in.